Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Cindy Chavez here. Today is Wednesday, March the 6th, 2019. It's 4 p.m. in New York, 1 p.m. in Los Angeles, 9 p.m. in London, Sydney, Australia. Good morning. It's 8 o'clock in the morning. And wherever you are in the world, thank you for joining us for another episode of LOA here today, your daily dose of happy. And I've got to start the show off in a very simple way by shouting out a happy birthday to my brother Mark. And I know he's doing well. He's enjoying his work. He actually works at NASA, believe it or not. He's doing rocket science, if you can imagine that. Not really, but awesome. I mean, he's doing software that supports what they do there. And so, yeah, happy birthday, Mark. I hope you're doing great. And
happy birthday.
Yeah. And I also wanted to start something. Today is Neville Day, by the way, and I love Neville Day. But before we get to Neville, I've been starting to do something in the last three episodes that has been working out pretty well, and I want to continue it with us here on this show. I've been going through Facebook and identifying some interesting questions that people have been posting and calling, two or three of them out to address. And I figured, okay, I've got about three of them here. Let's address them here with you because, Cindy, you're one of the best life coaches I know. And if you can't answer these, nobody can. So.
Well, how do I live up to that?
I don't know. Yeah, I kind of set you up for that one, didn't I? No, seriously, we'll just go after them the best we can. So the first one comes from someone named Lisa. She actually posted it, I think, late last night. But she said, is it possible to manifest a certain amount of money, she specified $3,000, on a consistent monthly basis to cover household bills? She says, I was just laid off from my job after 27 years. Now, I totally know that all things are possible when I align with God, but I guess the consistency thing is messing me up. So, yeah, well, that's something that a lot of people run into, the consistency thing. But what can we tell Lisa to help her achieve her goal of manifesting that monthly income?
Well, first I would say, yes, anything's possible. And in the scope of, what is possible, that particular request is very possible.
Yeah, sure.
Right? I mean, it's really doable. And I think the most important thing to remember when you're doing this kind of work is that this work that we do, this law of attraction, conscious creation kind of work, mindset work, I think it's important to remember that it works best when we do all of the other work as well. Like the mundane work as well as the magical work, if you will. I think that's really important because a lot of times people expect to use these tools and that's it.
Yeah.
And not right. So I always use the example of, well, you want to get yourself in a good mindset. You want to believe that anything's possible. You want to know that, sure, $3,000 can come in every month. That's not a problem. And you also want to give a shout out to your friends that you're looking for work. You want to put some resumes out. You want to open your ears and eyes and awareness for opportunities, because you need a channel for that money to come through. Right? And so I think that it's absolutely possible. And so sorry to hear about losing a job after 27 years. I mean, losing a job is rough regardless a lot of the time. But when you've had employment for such a long time and then suddenly you don't, that's a hard thing. But also knowing that, in my experience, when things like that happen, the way has just opened for something better to show up.
Right.
I mean, almost, it's always painful, but looking back, that's always the case, is that when there's a loss, something better shows up. So keep that in mind, too.
I think you're right. That's the first thought that came to my mind when I was reading this the first time, and as I read it aloud here on the show, was exactly that. This is a significant change in her life. Something is shifting. Not just the change in job fortune. Something is shifting, and you're right. It almost always results in something better than what there was before. So I'm going to be curious. I hope Lisa. I'm going to share what we're posting here today. What we're talking about here on the podcast with her, so she can hear it. But I'm hoping she'll get back to us later on as the situation changes and evolves, because I think there's going to be something really cool that comes out of it. But In the meantime,
well, that's a good thing for us to do as well, is to imagine the good report.
Yes.
We've done that before.
We have, right? Indeed.
We did that when Dee Dee was possibly going to have emergency surgery.
Right.
And we all just imagined having a good report, and we had a very good report.
Very good, yeah.
I'm just going to think about it that way. And also, I have a question. When you read her question, there was something said about consistency, but I was unclear exactly what that was pertaining to. Consistency of practice or consistency of money coming in? I wasn't sure.
The note that she wrote was not clear on that point. I took it to mean consistency of practice, but you're right, it could have been read either way. Okay.
Well, that's the thing we're all striving for, is to be consistent in our practice.
Yeah, no kidding. Right? Yeah. That is the task. That is the one and only task above all other tasks, just trying to stay consistent with this stuff. And it's a good one. Yeah. It's a good thing to do. So, okay, there's number one. Number two comes from Ruth. Ruth is feeling really low. She says, I'm really discouraged. It seems I have no ability to manifest anything at all. I try and try, but nothing comes to fruition, and I need some encouragement. There has to be something I'm doing wrong. And I'll tell you, I actually responded to that post. I said, look around you. Everything that you see, you manifested. You just have to understand that you manifest everything in your life. So that was my response to her. But what would be your response? How would you address her concern? Because that's something that people run into a lot, especially in early stages with law of attraction. But really, after you've been a deliberate creator for a while, you can get to that point where it just says, oh, geez, nothing's working here.
Well, I would say first the same exact thing you did is look around, and you are manifesting things. You're manifesting whatever you're experiencing. I mean, that's a manifestation. Right. So things are happening. But then there's a hint there. It's like, I try and try and try, which sounds like resistance. In other words, sometimes we have to relax and let go instead of try, and trust the process. In other words, I always liken it to planting seeds in a garden, and we plant the seeds. And to me, that's the beginning of this conscious creation practice. We decide to do some kind of work, whatever it is. We make a vision board, or we do a Neville exercise where we imagine ourselves, assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. We do some kind of work, and that's the seeds that were planted. And you think about, you plant seeds in a little garden plot by your door, and you walk by them every day, and you planted the seeds, but every day you walk by, it's just dirt, dirt, dirt. You don't see any activity. And it's like, I'm trying and trying and trying, right? I'm walking by, and every day that little plot of dirt is just a plot of dirt, and it's just dirt and more dirt and more dirt and more dirt.
Right.
And then one day a sprout comes up, and that's an exciting day when we start to see a little bit of whatever it is start to manifest. But there's this time gap where the seeds go in, and it looks like nothing's happening, but a great deal is happening. If we could know what's happening underground with those seeds, right, as they germinate, as they push their way up through the soil and finally break through. My husband grows bamboo from seeds, and we had a batch of bamboo seeds that he really was almost ready to give up. He thought they were dead seeds because they were just not coming up. And it was like, well, they should have come up in, 20 days or whatever, and then it was 30 days, and then it was 40 days, and he was like 2 days away from just pitching them all, and they started coming up. And it's such an object lesson, right? Because when you try and try and try, that tells me you're really attached to the outcome. You want to see something happen. And when we get into that place, we're actually resisting because we're so attached. So my advice on that would be to relax, to let go, to start being aware of anything in your life that's good. Anything. The sky is blue today, that's good, right?
Absolutely.
I saw some flowers on my walk today, that was nice. I mean, anything that you can find, and recognize that you are responsible for your own experience. And so you just manifested a blue sky and some beautiful flowers to smell. Whatever it is, open your awareness to good things.
That's good. I like that. I'm also a little surprised at the story that you told about your husband, because being married to a gardener, I pick up little bits and pieces. I'm not a gardening expert at all, but I do pick things up. And one of the things that I've heard often from Louise is, oh God, bamboo, you got to watch out for it. It takes over a garden. And here you are talking about a situation where you couldn't even get it to grow. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, there's a disparity going on here. We got people who've got bamboo running rampant through their garden, and your husband can't get it to grow at all. Hold on.
No. He's growing some beautiful bamboo. It's not getting it to grow, but it's getting it to grow from seed.
Okay.
Because if you notice, people often just buy bamboo plant, or they have a bamboo come from somewhere that's aggressive that takes over their garden when they never wanted it there in the first place. Right.
Oops.
Right. Yeah.
That's funny though. I couldn't miss that particular little tidbit just because I've been inundated by it. Third question. Actually, we have a fourth one that Jeffrey brought in. I'll do that one after this. But the third one is from Lee from New York. And what he wrote actually was not really totally easy to understand. So I'm just going to kind of chop it up in a little bit. Basically, it's very simple. He says, why am I attracting negative energy in people? And then the rest of it was kind of a little bit hard to discern what he was trying to say. But I got the impression that he was saying, it seems like I'm getting the opposite of what I thought I was putting out there. So how would you help Lee?
Well, first I want to say sometimes it's because we're looking for it. And I don't mean that in a judgy way, but what I mean is that part of our brain, is a system called the reticular activation system. Mm. And the way I always explain that one, right, is that part of our brain that alerts us to things that aren't right, that aren't the way they're supposed to be. And it's that same system that's responsible when you go buy a new car. It's like, I really like this car, and it's a certain color and a certain make, and you're like, I've never seen one like this. I'm really happy with my car. And you hop on the interstate, and the first week you're driving it, you see them everywhere. Mm-hmm. Suddenly those cars are everywhere. It's because you're tuned to it. You're aligned with it. And that system also would be, perhaps there would be a branch that would knock against my window at night, but I would sleep through it because I know it's that branch. It always makes that little noise. It knocks on my window. But if a person were to come and knock on my window, I would probably wake up, even though the sound is very similar. Yep. Because that part of my brain is alerting me, something's not right here. This is different. So that part of our brain tells us this is the same. This is normal. This over here is not the same. It's different. And sometimes once we start noticing something, that part of our brain won't stop pointing it out. Mm. So, for instance, you're like, I think I'm putting out good vibes. Why do I keep running into people that are so negative? And once we recognize that, then it's like we're seeing this negative attitude everywhere. It's like, oh my goodness, it's everywhere. And pretty soon, it's just like we notice it all the time. So, there are negative attitudes in the world, and sometimes we notice them. It doesn't always mean that it's directly reflecting our own attitude back at us. But we can use that, I think, because we can recognize the kind of attitude we don't want to have.
That's right.
Like, I don't want to have that kind of attitude, right? Mm-hmm. I don't want to have that kind of mindset. I don't want to be, negative all the time in the way I'm thinking. And so just use it that way, like a mirror. Like we talked about this, I think last week maybe. I talked about it on some interview or somewhere. I don't know. I think it was the podcast.
Okay.
But when we look in a mirror to check our hair or see if we have food in our teeth or see if our lipstick is on right, we look in the mirror, and if we see, my hair's a mess, then we just fix our hair. We don't talk about how ugly the mirror is. We don't smash the mirror. We don't scream at the mirror. We just go fix ourselves. So in that way, if we use our experience in life as a mirror that way, not to say, is this all a reflection of me? But just to say, I don't want to look like that. When I look in the mirror and, I say, oh gosh, I don't want my hair to look like that. I better grab a brush, right? And I just fix it. So it can be really useful to look at it that way and to not judge yourself that you're the one creating all of it. There are 7 billion, almost 8 billion people on the planet. They're all creating stuff. We're all creating stuff. And some of us are creating negative attitudes.
Yeah, no kidding. Absolutely. In fact, I like what you're
Hopefully
saying
none
there.
of us are creating negative attitudes, but
But I like what you're saying, and I would add to it that, when we're getting all this negativity coming at us, regardless of how we want to understand, why it's coming there, it's a great opportunity to practice. Okay, I got all this negative energy coming at me. How am I going to respond to it? Am I going to respond to it by saying, oh, I got all this negative energy and so many negative people, and I'm so sick of it? Or am I going to say, you know what? This is an opportunity to say, I don't really care about the negativity. It just doesn't matter to me. I'm going to let it go. I'm not going to let it, I'm going to let it wash over me and, que sera, sera. Who really cares? It isn't all that important to me. And in so doing, I'll drive the negativity away, or more precisely, I'll attract more people who are positive and who are happy and who are feeling good. So it's actually an opportunity, too.
And we have to recognize also that energy entrains to itself. So I think the great example of that is if you took the real physical examples, if you take two grandfather clocks and put them in a room together and the pendulums are swinging opposite, they will eventually sync up and start swinging the same.
Which is wild.
Right? And I told that story one time in an interview, and the person interviewing me said that they had spoken to a surgeon who said if you had two open heart surgery patients opened up on the table at the same time, their hearts would start syncing up and beating together.
Wow.
Right. And so, when you have this experience where you're in a great mood and then you run into somebody who's really negative, and all of a sudden you find yourself being grouchy and negative too, it happens. Mm-hmm. Because we align with each other's energy. So, and for some reason, that negative, that catabolic energy is very, very heavy. Mm. And it's much easier to get sucked into that than for your happy, positive, anabolic energy to rise them up when they're in a negative spot. Yeah. Because it's weighty. So, don't beat yourself up too much for experiencing negative attitudes. Just do your best to feel good.
That's good. I like that because you can't, you can only do your best. It's not like you can do better than your best. At any given moment, you have your best, and your best is whatever it is. And it's just, that's as far as you can go. So you just do what you can. Do your best.
You just do what you can. I used to have a friend that said sometimes you just have to do a chicken. And I'm like, do a chicken? He said, you just have to do what you can do. So that's a phrase now around here. It's just, you just have to do a chicken. You just have to do what you can do.
In fact, I'm reminded last week you shared with me a book that had a great title to it, Don't Do Your Best.
Yes.
Which was really cool.
Yeah.
That was a cool concept. I did get that book, by the way, and read.
Oh, good.
I didn't read the first 5 chapters, but I read like the first chapter and a half. And it was making a very good point that, doing your best actually in a sense is pushing yourself to say, I got to be perfect. Well, we don't have to be perfect.
Yeah. And, I love the message in that book because the idea that everything I do has to be, just top notch sometimes prevents us from doing anything at all. Mm-hmm. And, that was the focus there was just do it.
Right.
Just do what you can do. Mm-hmm. Just let it be good enough.
Exactly.
I think I heard one time, isn't there a expression that's like, good is the enemy of best or something like that, but it's the same kind of thought. It's we can just let things be good enough. Mm-hmm. And it's imperfect action.
Yes.
Is what it is. And, the two things that will lead to your success more than anything else. One is imperfect action, the willingness to take imperfect action. And that I always explain to clients who sometimes are perfectionistic. We're not talking about being okay with like shoddy craftsmanship. We're not talking about just putting out some, junk. But we're talking about letting it be good enough and tweaking it along the way. You can always change things to make them better if you decide, this would be better that way. But to go ahead and take actions. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is the skill and the ability to have a difficult conversation. Mm. Because people generally don't want to do that. So they put off conversations instead of letting them take place because they think it's going to be too uncomfortable or it might turn into a conflict or whatever. But if we'll just be willing to communicate and have a difficult conversation, they're usually not as difficult as we think.
That's a very good point. Yeah. And I especially like the first one in that one thing that I know I run into, I'm sure a lot of people run into this as well, is I'll have something to do. It has a creative component to it, and it is on something that's really important to me, and it's important to me that it come out right. You know, that it has the desired results, desired manifestation, whatever that manifestation is. And very often, not all the time, fortunately I'm getting better at this, but every once in a while I will have the experience of, you know, okay, I know that this is the next thing I got to do, but I got to do it right. And if I don't do it right, I'll ruin it. And that's how you get to that mindset of perfection. I'll ruin it. The whole thing will fall apart. Now, is that really true? Of course not. The whole thing's not going to fall apart. But that's the mindset. The mindset is, if I don't get this just right, the whole thing will be a disaster. I mean,
people are sometimes so afraid of a blank page or a blank canvas that I know some art teachers that will have you take the paper out of the thing, throw it on the floor, stomp on it with your feet a few times, right? It's like, okay, it's already ruined now. You can't make it any worse.
Right.
Drawing.
Well, it's like you told me about that course that you taught one time in, I think it was in painting, and in the course you tell the story better than I do. I'll let you tell it, but I love the results of the story.
I wrote a curriculum for an intuitive painting intensive workshop, and one of the things, we used to have signs all over the rooms. They said things like, paint it like you're going to burn it. You know, and we told everyone, like, this is not about you know, the outcome.
Right.
It's not about a project. It's about a process. And so they were completely, once they started painting, they all thought, okay, it doesn't matter whatever this isn't about the outcome. And they all made really beautiful paintings because suddenly they weren't attached to the outcome anymore.
That's incredible. That's really something. When you let that go of what you can do, it's really something.
Yeah.
And then we have one last question before we get into the book. This is a good one from Jeffrey, and it's very poignant, not only because of the topic he's addressing, but because all of us can think of a lot of other similar topics around the world. He says, can we create a peaceful solution to the conflict between India and Pakistan? And then in parentheses, he notes he has a friend that we know who's in danger there. A very noble thing to want to be able to do. And there are lots of instances of difficult things going on around the world, painful things, often deadly things going on. And we want to be able to help out. Can we help out?
Oh, well, I think that wanting peace is one of my main objectives in my life and has been since the time I was a child. I took a vow when I was a child to help bring peace on earth, and I took a bodhisattva vow as an adult, the same thing. And so I get you there. It's very important to me too. So where it starts is that we have to find peace within ourselves, no matter what's going on in the world. And then we have to reach out to whoever is in our path, if we can, to try to help them find peace within themselves. I believe there's a peaceful solution, but when we use that word, it sounds like we're going to come up with a mathematical equation that's going to suddenly create peace on earth. And as long as there are people that have an interest in war, we have to focus on what we can do with ourselves.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And, I don't feel like that's a cop-out. I just feel like it's the only thing I really can do. Mm-hmm. Is to find peace in myself and then try to share that. And I mean, wherever I can, on a one-on-one basis with clients, I try to help my clients find peace. And, and when I write and when I, produce certain creative content, that's always part of it, is does this bring inner peace to somebody? Because until we all have inner peace, we won't have outer peace. Because as within, so without. As above, so below. It's a hermetic principle. It is the way it is. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if that gives you much hope, but I do believe that prayer and meditation and visualization. I think those three things are all pretty much the same thing. They might just be practiced in different ways, but they are effective and they do bring change as well as working for change however we can. So
yeah, I agree
that's
with
my...
that. And I would also add there's lots of evidence showing that when groups, even small groups of people, concentrate their energy together, both for the good and for the ill, yes. Either way you look at it, results happen.
Yes.
I mean, I can point to, first I'll point to a couple of negative situations here in the U.S., and I'm kind of risking things because these have a political side to them. But my point is to make a law of attraction point. One of the main things that President Trump has focused on since he was a candidate was the need to seal off the border with Mexico, claiming that the border was being inundated with people who were trying to come in illegally. And at the time that he was running, there was some degree of that happening. It wasn't really a major thing going on. But since then, he and his followers have hammered and hammered and hammered on that. And while the time they've been hammering that, the increase has been absolutely astronomical. Just in the last 6 months, since October 2018, it has increased 300% in that time period because of this constant attention they're putting on it. And that's just one example. There are other examples. Here in the U.S., now there's a big thing going on with racism and sexism and all the isms and so forth. And that's now turning into a big deal. I mean, all this focus that people put on stuff
whatever
creates
we
the big
focus
deal.
on expands.
It really does. And similarly, we know of situations on the flip side where, for instance, I can't think what the group is called. There's a group that has a very common name that I can't remember the name of, but they focus on like the city of Washington, D.C. for a day, and they focus on peace in Washington, D.C. for that day, and Washington police notice that day that crime is down 20%. That kind of thing. They do that kind of thing over and over and over again. So it can also work for the positive. If you get a group of people concentrating their efforts on one positive thought, you do get a positive result out of it. There's also, what's her name? I can't remember the name of the woman who wrote the book on concentrating group energy, and she tends to do it in terms of helping people to heal, people who have dread disease.
Oh, it's Lynn McTaggart?
Lynn McTaggart, yes, that's her name.
Mm-hmm.
And there's another example, people focusing as a group. We did it with Dee Dee, but people focusing on a group, as a group on a single individual, helping them to heal. So clearly, and these things all happen in relatively short periods of time, too. So clearly it is effective. So can we create a peaceful solution? The answer is yes, we can. We can by concentrating our effort on focusing on peace. Now, does that guarantee that there will never be any war? Well, no. I mean, that's not realistic. But we can help bring peace to the current situation. And that's always a good thing.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. So.
Good questions.
Very good questions. Excellent questions. And Dee Dee was also sharing some of her commentary, too. Let's see if I can find a particular good thing that she said that was useful. She said, they had such a long conversation here. I think I'd be kind of breaking up their conversation if I tried to summarize it into one. But nevertheless, if you're listening to the live stream, read the comments. There's really, really good comments there, more than we can cover in a reasonable amount of time, but good stuff there. So anyway, today is Neville Day, and we're going to pick up our Neville books. And we're talking about Your Faith is Your Fortune. And we're on chapter 11, and this is the way I feel about doing Neville every week. The chapter title is perfect. It's Christmas.
The title is Christmas.
That's the
title
of
I
the
laughed
chapter.
out loud when I saw that, right?
Oh, I did too.
Oh, that's funny.
And the next chapter is just as good too. I mean, it's even because it's tough. The next chapter talks about Easter. I mean, so this is where Neville really. This is where the Neville rubber hits the road, and you really learn just how different Neville's interpretation of this is from, say, the standard Christian approach. So, anyway,
we are, and once again, right off the bat, Neville is going to start with a Christian scripture from the Christian Bible, and so we always make this disclaimer. Those of you that have been listening already know it, but just in case there's someone that's new listening, Neville often uses verses from the Christian Bible, but his definition and explanations, interpretations of these verses is completely different than anything that most of us have ever heard. It's very esoteric. And so, and he will explain it, and we'll do our best to explain as well. But he starts right off the bat. He says, "Behold, a virgin shall be with child, and shall bring forth a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel," which being interpreted is God with us. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of commentary first, just a reminder that when Neville talks about God or Christ, or that he is talking about imagination and consciousness. Either one. So keep that in mind as we keep going.
Yeah, he's very consistent about that.
Yes. Neville says one of the most controversial statements in the New Testament concerns the virgin conception and subsequent birth of Jesus, a conception in which man had no part. It is recorded that a virgin conceived a son without the aid of man, then secretly and without effort gave birth to her conception. This is the foundation upon which all Christendom rests. The Christian world is asked to believe this story, for man must believe the unbelievable to fully express the greatness that he is. Scientifically, man might be inclined to discard the whole Bible as untrue, because his reason will not permit him to believe that the virgin birth is physiologically possible. But the Bible is a message of the soul and must be interpreted psychologically if man is to discover its true symbology. Man must see this story as a psychological drama rather than a statement of physical fact. In doing so, he will discover the Bible to be based on a law which, if self-applied, will result in a manifested expression transcending his wildest dreams of accomplishment. To apply this law of self-expression, man must be schooled in the belief and disciplined to stand upon the platform that all things are possible to God. The outstanding dramatic dates of the New Testament, namely the birth, death, and resurrection of Jesus, were timed and dated to coincide with certain astronomical phenomena. The mystics who recorded this story noticed that at certain seasons of the year, beneficial changes on earth coincided with astronomical changes above. In writing this psychological drama, they've personified the story of the soul as the biography of a man. Using these cosmic changes, they have marked the birth and resurrection of Jesus to convey that the same beneficial changes take place psychologically in the consciousness of man as he follows the law. Even to those who fail to understand it, the story of Christmas is one of the most beautiful stories ever told. When unfolded in the light of its mystic symbology, it is revealed as the true birth of every manifestation in the world. This virgin birth is recorded as having taken place on December 25th, or as certain secret societies celebrate it, on Christmas Eve at midnight of December 24th. Mystics established this date to mark the birth of Jesus because it was in keeping with the great earthly benefits this astronomical change signifies. The astronomical observations, which prompted the authors of this drama to use these dates, were all made in the northern hemisphere. So from an astronomical point of view, the reverse will be true if seen from the southern latitudes. However, this story was recorded in the north and therefore was based on northern observation. Man very early discovered that the sun played a most important part in his life, that without the sun, physical life as he knew it could not be. So these most important dates in the story of the life of Jesus are based upon the position of the sun as seen from the earth in the northern latitudes. After the sun reaches its highest point in the heavens in June, it gradually falls southward, taking with it the life of the plant world, so that by December almost all of nature has been stilled. Should the sun continue to fall southward, all nature would be stilled unto death. However, on December 25th, the sun begins its great move northward, bringing with it the promise of salvation and life anew for the world. Each day as the sun rises higher in the heavens, man gains confidence in being saved from death by cold and starvation, for he knows that as it moves northward and crosses the equator, all nature will rise again, will be resurrected from its long winter sleep. Our day is measured from midnight to midnight, and since the visible day begins in the east and ends in the west, the ancients said the day was born of that constellation which occupied the eastern horizon at midnight. On Christmas Eve, or midnight of December 24th, the constellation Virgo is rising on the eastern horizon. So it is recorded that this Son and Savior of the world was born of a virgin. It's also recorded that this virgin mother was traveling through the night, that she stopped at an inn and was given the only available room among the animals, and there in a manger where the animals fed, the shepherds found the Holy Child. The animals with whom the Holy Virgin was lodged are the holy animals of the zodiac. There in that constantly moving circle of astronomical animals stands the Holy Mother, Virgo, and there you will see her every midnight of December 24th, standing on the eastern horizon as the Son and Savior of the world starts his journey northward. Psychologically, this birth takes place in man on that day when man discovers his consciousness to be the Son and Savior of his world. When man knows the significance of this mystical statement, I am the light of the world, he will realize that his I am, or consciousness, is the sun of his life, which sun radiates images upon the screen of space. These images are in the likeness of that which he, as man, is conscious of being. Thus, qualities and attributes which appear to move upon the screen of his world are really projections of this light from within himself. The numberless, unrealized hopes and ambitions of man are the seeds which are buried within the consciousness or virgin womb of man. There they remain like seeds of earth, held in the frozen waste of winter, waiting for the sun to move northward or for man to return to the knowledge of who he is. In returning, he moves northward through recognition of his true self by claiming, I am the light of the world. When man discovers his consciousness, or I am, to be God, the Savior of his world, he will be as the sun in its northern passage. All hidden urges and ambitions will then be warmed and stimulated into birth by this knowledge of his true self. He will claim that he is that which heretofore he hoped to be. Without the aid of any man, he will define himself as that which he desires to express. He will discover that his I am is the virgin conceiving without the aid of man, that all conceptions of himself, when felt and fixed in consciousness, will be embodied easily as living realities in his world. Man will one day realize that this whole drama takes place in his consciousness, that his unconditioned consciousness, or I am, is the Virgin Mary desiring to express that through this law of self-expression he defines himself as that which he desires to express without the help or cooperation of anyone. He will express that which he has consciously claimed and defined himself as being. He will then understand why Christmas is fixed on December 25th, while Easter is a movable date, why upon the virgin conception the whole of Christendom rests, that his consciousness is the virgin womb or bride of the Lord, receiving impressions as self-impregnations, and then without assistance, embodying these impressions as the expressions of his life.
I think we broke a record here. We broke a record. We went through the entire chapter without one interruption, without stopping once. It actually just kept
stopping place.
It just kept going.
I was waiting for a stopping place.
And meanwhile, I was having this imaginary scene in my head played out where the Pope was falling into a dead faint and the cardinals were getting together trying to figure out how to spin this into a story that would fit better into the Catholic liturgy. So
well, it's a very interesting and very esoteric take on the idea of Christianity, the idea of Christmas, the idea of the virgin birth. Very, very interesting. You know, it's funny. We were talking about, things happening that were big shifts. And right now, the planets are moving, if you follow astrology, and Uranus is going into the sign of Taurus and will be there for 7 years. And Uranus is the planet of chaos and revolution and also, though, of inspiration and of new ideas, visionary ideas. And so it's really interesting to think every 7 years it changes into a different sign. And when it does, there's usually something that happens, some big things that happen in the world in whatever, that relate to whatever sign it's in. And so I think when I'm reading this, I'm like, okay, well, I can, I can say, all right, okay.
For me, it's funny because, I remember early on in my young adult life, my sister explaining astrology to me for the first time. And I remember my reaction vividly, because my reaction was to roll my eyes and to smile pleasantly and to just say, oh boy, that is the dumbest thing I ever heard in my life. And here we are reading Neville's take on how the astrological signs actually tie into the Christmas story. And I'm thinking, boy, but my previous thoughts come back to haunt me. It just scares the daylights out of me.
It's really funny though. I really, whether you agree with Neville or not, because this is so out there to me anyway. Not any more out there than some of the verses that he's referencing, but
Sure.
Still something I haven't heard before. But the idea that, of all the animals in the zodiac, that was going through my mind, right, as I was reading it. I'm like, okay, so you've got the ram and the bull and the fish and the sea goat and it's like, okay, that's interesting. And then you've got the Virgin, the Virgo, right in the middle. So I think it's kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I was also... oh, go ahead.
And I was just going to say, like I've said before, I think that you could take all of Neville's take on anything that has to do with any religion and pitch it and just keep whatever else he says and it would still be the same story. Like,
right.
He's very consistent in what he believes. And then he will go and kind of, I don't want to say make it fit like he's forcing it, but I think that he was speaking to a particular audience. He was speaking in churches.
He was.
So I think he was giving his, interpretation of some of these things. And they're very interesting.
My impression is he was a very, very devout man. He was a very devout Christian. And I think this actually represents a triumph for him, a triumph of taking the traditional story that he and his friends knew so well and reshaping it, reforming the understanding of it that he had to fit what he'd been teaching all along and what his friend Abdullah had taught him about how we are God, our consciousness, our imagination is what is actually meant by God. And so I think this is actually a big victory for him to tell the story this way. There's lots of different explanations about the origin of December 25th as being Christmas. There are stories that indicate, well, no, the original Christmas was actually in March, and it was at the beginning of March. No, it was at the end of March. No, actually, it was just before Easter. There's all these different traditions.
Yeah, December 25th was actually Saturnalia, which is a pagan celebration.
Right. Well, there's that part of the story too. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So there's a lot of explanations, and you can really you can go down a number of rabbit holes with these explanations. But I think the key here is it doesn't really matter when December 25th was picked or why it was picked or anything. What matters is the story that Neville is telling psychologically. And he says it himself. That's what this is all about. This is a psychological story going on here, to be understood psychologically. And when we understand it that way, it fits perfectly with what Neville has taught us in every book.
When I think, okay, December 25th was Saturnalia, which was a pagan festival. I'm thinking, see, Neville wasn't the first or only one to try to force something to make it fit, right?
Exactly. If I want to be really precise about it, he says, well, the 25th is when the cycle starts to go back toward the warmer weather. Well, actually, it's the 21st, so if you want to be really, really pissy about it, well, it's actually 4 days before, but who cares? It still makes a nice story. And that's really the important thing. We love stories. Human beings love stories. And stories are a great way to teach. That's really what this is. This is a way of teaching through a story. And it's through a story that so many people, certainly in the Christian world, know really, really well. So on the one hand, he was being very daring by taking on this story and retelling it.
The first time I read Neville and he got into, and it wasn't this book, it was a different book, but he was getting into some of the parables. And of course I knew those parables really well because of my upbringing.
Right.
And I was like, oh wow, I was kind of blown away at what he was saying because at the time I wasn't a Christian, so I wasn't offended by it.
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not a Christian now, and I'm not offended by it, but I had been. So I was like, ooh, this is going to be offensive to a lot of people. Like, it was so far out there.
Right.
And he's committed. I mean, he will double down on it. He's committed to his viewpoint here. And so I think it's really interesting, that he sticks to it. And that, like you said, I agree. I think it is a triumph for him because he really did. He kind of knocked it out of the park, He
did. And he did it in a way that for those who can let their preconceptions about what the Christian story is supposed to be saying, for those who can let that part go, it's actually a very illuminating explanation that he gives. The challenge and the reason why so many people would tend to reject it is that it doesn't fly in. It flies in the face of the traditional official explanation about what the Christ story is all about in terms of the birth of Christ. That's where the resistance comes in.
But it wasn't until 400 years after Christ was here, if he was here, that all of this was codified. And the word virgin, it never meant a woman that had never had a sexual experience. It meant a woman that was unmarried and that had agency over her sexual experiences.
Exactly.
So it wasn't about this sexual purity and all of that. It had nothing to do with that. So it's very interesting, if you trace the history back and you realize what words actually meant, then the story changes again. So,
And that, I think, is the message right there. It's always a story. Everyone tells a story differently.
Yes.
Everyone has a different take on a story. Everyone has a different way of understanding a story. And they're all valid. Every approach is a valid approach because it works for people. I mean, the only approach that doesn't work is the one that doesn't work, because nobody buys into it. They're like, oh, I can't suspend my disbelief on that story. That's just, completely unbelievable. Forget that one. That's the only one that doesn't work. Every other story is valid. And every other story is useful for that reason.
Well, it's like, we're always winning the game we're playing, so.
Yeah, that's right.
Right?
You always get it right and the road goes on forever.
That's right. That's right.
But that was great.
I don't know how long the 12th chapter is.
We actually have a shot. We can get through it because we only took about 15, 17 minutes on that, so we could do it. We can start it anyway because we've covered Christmas, and this one, like you said, is apparently about Easter. So let's see what Neville has to say. Well, especially since in that last paragraph of that last of what you just read, while Easter is a movable date, he kind of left that one hanging. So we got to find out what he means by that, right?
Right. So he starts again, crucifixion and resurrection. He starts with a verse from the Christian Bible. He says, "I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live." Neville says the mystery of the crucifixion and the resurrection is so interwoven that to be fully understood, the two must be explained together, for one determines the other. This mystery is symbolized on earth in the rituals of Good Friday and Easter. You have observed that the anniversary of this cosmic event, announced every year by the Church, is not a fixed date, as are other anniversaries marking births and deaths, but that this day changes from year to year, falling anywhere from the 22nd day of March to the 25th day of April. The day of resurrection is determined in this manner. The first Sunday after the full moon in Aries is celebrated as Easter. Aries begins on the 21st day of March and ends approximately on the 19th day of April. The sun's entry into Aries marks the beginning of spring. The moon is in its monthly transit around the earth will form sometime between March 21st and April 25th, an opposition to the sun, which opposition is called a full moon. The first Sunday after this phenomena of the heavens occurs is celebrated as Easter. The Friday preceding this day is observed as Good Friday. This movable date should tell the observant one, to look for some interpretation other than the one commonly accepted. These days do not mark the anniversaries of the death and resurrection of an individual who lived on earth. Seen from the earth, the sun, in its northern passage, appears at the spring season of the year to cross the imaginary line man calls the equator. So it is said by the mystic to be crossified or crucified that man might live.
Whoa.
It is significant that Go ahead.
No, that's all. It's just like a big reaction. Like, okay, here we go with a real big shift.
Okay, classified. It is significant that soon after this event takes place, all nature begins to arise or resurrect itself from its long winter sleep. Therefore, it may be concluded that this disturbance of nature at this season of the year is due directly to this crossing. Thus, it is believed that the sun must shed its blood on the Passover. Now he's talking about Passover.
Yeah.
If these days marked the death and resurrection of a man, they would be fixed so that they would fall on the same date every year as all other historical events are fixed. But obviously this is not the case. These dates were not intended to mark the anniversaries of the death and resurrection of Jesus, the man. The scriptures are psychological dramas and will reveal their meaning only as they are interpreted psychologically. These dates are adjusted to coincide with the cosmic change which occurs at this time of year, marking the death of the old year and the beginning or resurrecting of the new year or spring. These dates do symbolize the death and resurrection of the Lord, but this Lord is not a man. It is your awareness of being. It is recorded that he gave his life that you might live. I am come that you might have life and that you might have it more abundantly. Consciousness slays itself by detaching itself from that which it is conscious of being so that it may live to that which it desires to be. Spring is the time of year when the millions of seeds, which all winter lay buried in the ground, suddenly spring into visibility that man might live. And because the mystical drama of the crucifixion and resurrection is in the nature of this yearly change, it is celebrated at this spring season of the year, but actually it is taking place every moment of time. The being who is crucified is your awareness of being. The cross is your conception of yourself. The resurrection is the lifting into visibility of this conception of yourself. Far from being a day of mourning, Good Friday should be a day of rejoicing, for there can be no resurrection or expression unless there is first a crucifixion or impression. The thing to be resurrected, in your case, is that which you desire to be. To do this, you must feel yourself to be the thing desired. You must feel, I am the resurrection and the life of the desire. I am, your awareness of being, is the power resurrecting and making alive that which is in your awareness you desire to be. Two shall agree on touching anything, and I shall establish it on earth. Again, I say unto you, that if two of you shall agree on earth as touching anything that they shall ask, it shall be done for them of my Father which is in heaven. The two agreeing are you, your awareness, the consciousness desiring, and the thing desired. When this agreement is attained, the crucifixion is completed. Two have crossed or crossified each other. So this reminds me of Abraham talking about alignment. Being in alignment with the thing we desire, right?
Very much so, yeah.
He says, I am and that. Consciousness and that which you are conscious of being have joined and are one. I am now nailed or fixed in the belief that I am this fusion. Jesus, or I am, is nailed upon the cross of that. The nail that binds you upon the cross is the nail of feeling. The mystical union is now consummated, and the result will be the birth of a child or the resurrection of a son bearing witness of his father. Consciousness is united to that which it is conscious of being. The world of expression is the child confirming this union. The day you cease to be conscious of being that which you are now conscious of being, that day your child or expression shall die and return to the bosom of his father, the faceless, formless awareness. All expressions are the results of such mystical unions. So the priests are correct when they say that true marriages are made in heaven and can only be dissolved in heaven. But let me clarify this statement by telling you that heaven is not a locality. It is a state of consciousness. The kingdom of heaven is within you. In heaven, consciousness, God is touched by that which he is aware of being. Who has touched me? For I perceive virtue has gone out of me. The moment this touching, feeling takes place, there is an offspring or a going out of me into visibility taking place. The day man feels, I am free, I am wealthy, I am strong, God, I am, is touched or crucified by these qualities or virtues. The result of such touching or crucifying will be seen in the birth or resurrection of the qualities felt. For man must have visible confirmation of all that he is conscious of being. Now you will know why man or manifestation is always made in the image of God. Your awareness imagines and outpictures all that you are aware of being. I am the Lord, and beside me there is no God. I am the resurrection and the life. You shall become fixed in the belief that you are that which you desire to be. Before you have any visible proof that you are, you will, from the deep conviction which you have felt fixed within you, know that you are so. And so without waiting for the confirmation of your senses, you will cry, it is finished. Then with a faith born of the knowledge of this changeless law, you will be as one dead and entombed. You will be still and unmoved in your conviction and confident that you will resurrect the qualities that you have fixed and are feeling within you.
Wow.
You know what stands out to me of that whole chapter is the idea that something has to go for something else to come in.
Yeah.
Right? There's something that I say, my people that have followed me for a while and all of my clients have heard me say, every big shift comes after a big letting go. And what I see with his crucifixion and resurrection metaphor is that the old person we were has to die for the new person to be born. The new identity. Like we can't hold on to those old things and expect to be somebody else. And it's really interesting that he uses that metaphor, but I think it's a really powerful one.
It is. And also, we have a new definition for that, a new equivalency for God, Jesus, consciousness, imagination, and that is the kingdom of heaven. So now we have to add to the Neville decoder ring and understand once more, this is another metaphorical meaning. This is an expression of consciousness, and now that we're understanding, and this is big. This is a big shift compared to what we're traditionally taught in church school. That this is all about us and how we manifest our reality. In fact, even as you were reading it, there was one section there, one sentence that included the words man and manifest in the same sentence, and it really struck home for me. Manifesting is manning. It is man creating, manifesting. And wow, it just, I'm speechless after hearing what he had to say. Oops, we just lost the voice there. What happened here? I'm not sure.
Here I am.
Oh, there you are. Hello. But that's
I looked up and my mic was muted. I don't know. I must have done that somehow.
That's all right. No problem. Well, we're down to our last minute, so we timed it beautifully. I don't know what else to even say. I think he said it beautifully, so we can kind of leave it there. How about for you? What can we tell people about how to reach out to Cindy Chavez, who obviously knows this stuff really, really well? If they want a little help, how do they reach you?
They can find me online at my website, cindychavez.com, CINDIEDHAVEZ.com. There's a contact form there. I would love to hear from you, just to even say hello. You don't have to need to hire me to reach out and say hello. Just let me know how you are, what you enjoy about the podcast, what's going on in your life. I'd love to get a shout out from you.
It's fun, isn't it? When we do get the contacts from people, it's like, oh wow,
it's great.
The day just got made once more. So.
Yay.
Fantastic. Thank you once again for guiding us through this. I can hardly wait to see where we're going in Chapter 14. It's going to be really cool. But in the meantime, I would say thank you. I'll talk to you next week. Thanks to our listeners as well, and we'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.